And it was one of my early victories over Sir Humphrey, was when I persuaded my elders and betters at that point that the country's prime public health institution ought to ensure that legislative constraints on the disposal of dangerous waste ought to apply to the health service preeminently. The health service should be in front, not claiming that that laws of that nature didn't apply to the health service. So anyway, we won that battle over 30 years ago, and much more currently, the health service in the form of Lisa Dittmar actually is setting out to lead, to exercise a leadership function in developing a carbon-free economy. And we'll come on to talk about exactly the role that the health service plays. But I welcome Lisa to this webinar in order to show that the health service has learnt from where it was 33 years ago, probably before Lisa was born, but that's by the way. Our other guest this morning is to demonstrate that this is an issue that is, of course, not just a UK health NHS concern. It's by the nature of the climate change challenge, it is a global challenge, one embraced by the United Nations as a wider organization, and in particular by the United Nations Development Programme, where our second guest, and the first I'm going to invite to speak, is Ian Milimo, who's worked for United Nations Development Programme for the last 12 years, and for the last 4.5 years has led the UNDP role in this the application of the decarbonising principles to the healthcare system. Before I ask our two guests to speak, I just want a little bit of housekeeping. The presentations they're going to make to us will be published after this webinar, but the conversation that we intend to have following the presentations will be conducted under the Chatham House rule, which means very simply that the point of view that is expressed can be used and reported, but it cannot be attributed. It's therefore, you contribute to public debate, but without the embarrassment of having to defend your point of view if you don't feel so inclined. So that's the Chatham House rule. The form of the webinar will be first a presentation from Ian, then a presentation from Lisa, and then I shall seek to encourage a discussion between the participants in the webinar. And if you wish to contribute to that discussion, could I ask you just to indicate through the chat function. We'll follow the Q&A, but if you put something into the chat, I can seek to bring in and to promote a discussion around a series of themes. So I shall be watching the chat and asking you, if you wish to come in to contribute as well as to ask questions. So without any further ado, Ian, you're extremely welcome. I've already referred to the fact that you're committed significant part of your life to the UN Development Programme, respect you for that, and you lead the UN voice on the importance of decarbonising the healthcare, the supply chain, and decarbonising the delivery of healthcare as a contributor to carbon emissions in the world. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Steve, for this background information. Yes, I think we have a team on the UN side that we have been combining efforts to address this issue. And thank you so much, Steve, for reminding us that the work that we are discussing this afternoon or this morning has a history that some of you have contributed to. And we thank you so much for setting the preamble and the background to the work that we are doing now and the products that we are going to be speaking to on this webinar. My presentation this afternoon is in two parts. I will, in a minute, ask my colleague to play a video for only 2.5 minutes, essentially for us to understand the complexity of this development challenge. As Stephen did mention, this is a global challenge. This is not only domiciled in the United Kingdom, we see it in all corners of the world. And therefore, as I said, we need to watch this video to demonstrate the complications that we are dealing with, and also to demonstrate what UNDP stands for in terms of addressing the nexus between climate and health. Please, can you play the video? Thank you.
Yep. 1 second. As an organization that is also focused on eradicating poverty, we have learned a bitter lesson that many of the people, indeed 40% of those who escape extreme poverty, fall back into poverty. And very often this is related to a health crisis in the family. The fact is, as the SDGs and many of the reports that we produce, including through our sister agency, the World Health Organization, show us that we have a long way to go to achieve universal health coverage, and indeed to fulfill some of the promises, be they constitutional or in terms of fundamental human rights, in terms of access to treatment, non-discrimination, and many other issues. Inequality remains one of the most challenging aspects in addressing the issue of health in development. But new phenomena such as climate change are also posing new threats and new risks to already heavy investments that countries have made. When we in UNDP talk about the next generation UNDP, and we talk about the future of development, then it also has something to do with new approaches, perhaps more equitable approaches, and also looking at how we can leverage technology, best practices, and bring innovation to a field that in one sense is thousands of years old, and yet is being reinvented almost every 10 years right now. Being engaged in health policy as part of a sustainable development strategy and the 2030 agenda makes a great deal of sense for UNDP.
Sustainability and equity are the grand challenges of our time, and this is especially true for HIV and health. If we don't address the issues at the nexus of health, inequalities, the climate crisis, the digital revolution, we will not achieve many of the health-related SDGs and the SDGs more broadly. UNDP, together with our partners, WHO, the Global Fund, the Joint UN Program on HIV and AIDS, and others, is working in 129 countries to support HIV and health responses. The climate crisis threatens to undo decades of progress in global health, and it's presenting even new health challenges, ranging from exacerbated air pollution to extreme weather events, which are ravaging health systems and communities, to disease outbreaks and health emergencies. At the same time, if the health sector were a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter of carbon emissions globally. UNDP is working with partners to strengthen the resilience of health systems and improve sustainable procurement in the health sector. Growing in
Back to you.
Thank you so much. Essentially, colleagues, you've seen that we are dealing with an issue that is not simple at all, an issue that needs the effort of the global world in order to stem the issues that we are addressing. I will now go through a number of slides. Just a minute. So I have a set of slides that I want to discuss this afternoon, essentially highlighting quite a number of actions that myself and my colleagues who are on the call and those that are in other countries have been working on in the last number of years. So my presentation is divided in those 4 steps, and we're going to go through that. Starting with an issue that was fully highlighted in the video. We are coming from a state where the health sector has always been seen as a victim of climate change. Evidence that has been brought to us by many partners, including Healthcare.harm, whom we have been working closely in implementing this program, demonstrate that the health sector is partly contributing to the crisis that we are addressing. Evidence has demonstrated that if it was a country, the health sector would be the 5th largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So this in itself calls upon partners, including ourselves, and many of you that are on this call to come up with prototypes, strategies and policies and systems that can contribute to the decarbonization of the health sector. And as I said, this is the key theme of this webinar. On the UN side, this is a partnership that has been in existence for a long time. We have a program that we call Sustainable Procurement in the Health Sector Initiative that brings together the 10 member agencies that are on the left side of the screen. Essentially, the idea is to work together on a number of issues that are going to contribute towards the decarbonization of the health sector as member organizations. And part of my presentation, we have chosen to contribute towards this important vehicle through procurement. We are the leading procurer agencies that have come together. Before COVID, we were procuring health commodities to the amount of $5 billion. And when COVID kicked in, that amount doubled to about $10 to $12 billion. So the idea is, let's come together as global institutions using procurement to support the decarbonization of the health sector. We have been addressing quite a number of issues, some of which are on this slide, including energy, gender issues, medical products, transport, water, packaging. All these are critical aspects that, if done very well, are going to contribute towards the decarbonization of the health sector. And jointly working together, we have produced a number of products that I will highlight during the presentation that we have made available to a number of our global partners, including governments, to apply to their own procurement processes in an effort to decarbonize the health sector. Specifically, our entry point as UNDP has been through a project which we are calling the Sustainable Health in Procurement Project that has been financed by the government of Sweden, essentially with the sole purpose of supporting the decarbonization of the health sector through procurement to make sure that the products that we are procuring, the products that we are making available for the health sector do not cause harm to the life of the people and the life of the environment. We had 10 focus countries that are listed on the screen, but to reach more, we also had a regional approach that took us to Southeast Asia, Latin America, and the Southern Africa Development Community, where we have been able to interact with more than 16 member states. Over the number of years, I did mention that we have put together a number of tools that have been made available to ministries of health in many countries. Key among them is a Sustainable Procurement Index that will be key and part of my presentation. But above and beyond that, we have additional documents and tools that we have put across, including the chemicals of concern, that has been used widely by ministries of health to revise their own procurement tools and lists to make sure that commodities that are known to cause harm to the life of the people and the life of the planet do not get procured. In order for us to support the capacity building efforts, we have also put across the Sustainable Procurement Guidance Note that is available online for partners like you to take up and build your own capacity build needs, supporting your partners in making sure that the knowledge that we are generating in many projects is getting to the end users. Over the years, as I said, I think we have put up a number of tools. And one of them, which, as I said, will be the focus of my discussion, is the procurement index. This work started quite a long time ago. In 2015, we produced what we call as the Green Procurement Index for Health. That has been widely applied and used by many partners at different levels of the healthcare supply chain. That came alongside with its own environmental questionnaire. Again, that has been applied in a number of procurement events. So for us, the idea was to create a criteria that was going to be uniform, a monitoring tool that was going to help in terms of continuous improvement in green procurement practices. Very important. But we did realize that this tool was made available before the onset of the SDGs, and therefore had a number of issues based on the feedback that we got that needed to be updated. We did hear that the tool was a little bit cumbersome. We did hear that the two also lacked quite a number of issues that are key to the attainment of SDGs. And those are things that I'm going to address in my next few slides. And based on this feedback and experience and talking to a number of partners, working with Healthcare Without Harm and ARO, we embarked on developing the Sustainable Procurement Index for Health in 2018. And the idea of this index is basically to create a platform where decision makers, buyers, and suppliers have got a uniform and standardized methods of basing their decisions. We also wanted to make sure that we have a consistent, robust system and method that communicates expectations at both ends of the supply chain. We also decided to put a tool that is proportionate and relevant to addressing some of the key material issues that are contributing to the high carbon emission in the health sector. But also importantly, we wanted to make sure that the key themes that are addressed in the Sustainable Development Agenda are fully highlighted and taken on board. For us, this is very important because this becomes one of the key available tools that can help the health sector and other sectors in making sure that any development interventions do not contribute to emissions that are detrimental to the life of the people and the planet. In designing this instrument, we believe in the power of partnerships at different levels. As a project team working together with ARO, Healthcare Without Harm, EGON, and Clean Production Action, we engaged a group of partners that we termed as an expert group. Knowing that knowledge exists in different platforms, we worked with these institutions that include UNICEF, PAHO, UNDP, Auckland, ZIPA, and many others to make sure that they provide that feedback that we needed for us to perfect the product that we were working on. But also we made sure that before we put this tool out for global use, we took it to the key people that are supposed to use it. And therefore we piloted this institution with a number of partners, development partners, ministries of health, private sector, farmers, producers, and many others. This was very critical for us to get the necessary feedback that was needed in order to make sure that we are producing a tool that is going to be of use to the health sector. What products are being measured by the index? We have the tool that we have put across can measure what we call general products, including medical gloves, bandages, devices, and equipment. But we also have a tool that is dedicated towards pharmaceutical products. Essentially, you're talking about, for example, malaria drugs. But we know that this can also be tailored to many other situations, as I would say when I go into the next slides. But I think for us, what is key is this is a tool that is available to be applied on the main manufacturer of a product. Essentially, for example, if you are buying products through a company in India, our intention is to make sure that we understand the materials that went into the production of that, to make sure that the content and the tool itself does not contribute to carbon emissions. The index was specifically designed for buyers and suppliers, and this allows us to work at both ends of the supply chain. And it also allows us to make sure that we identify those key entry points that needs support in terms of promoting sustainability dimensions within the health sector. But additionally, the list of partners that are on the bottom of the page have also found use for the index and are using it in different ways to introduce a number of sustainability measures. For example, you'll hear in my next few slides how policymakers are using the index to change their own procurement policies, to change their own regulations, and to make sure that they are also complying. And this has been seen in a number of countries, including those that are in the developing South. We have also seen research bodies and universities, for example, University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, taking on board the key dimensions of the index to make sure that they create a research agenda that is facilitating the whole move towards the sustainability of the health sector, identifying those soft and hard entry points that can help us get to the greener and sustainable healthcare systems. The index has got 4 main themes, which are critical and cover quite a wide range of issues that are addressed in the Sustainable Development Goals. greenhouse gas emissions, resource depletion, chemicals and toxicity, and also gender, human and labor rights, which we simply term as social dimensions. And for us, this is very important because it allows the health sector to have a comprehensive approach to addressing issues of sustainability, not only addressing environmental issues, but also addressing social dimensions. That I always say that these are critical issues, and they are issues that are part and parcel of our DNA as the United Nations, things that are very critical, and I think it's very important. So what do we mean by greenhouse gas emissions? Essentially, it's understanding whether the products, the equipment, and the medicines that we are procuring for the health sector is contributing to emissions. We want to know how the product is being procured. We want to know how the product is being manufactured. That in itself allows us to come up with measures that are supposed to cut those emissions. If a product is known to have all these detrimental effects, it should not be procured in the first place. And this is why procurement becomes very important. In terms of social dimension, just to highlight 1 or 2 points, for us, critical to this effect is the fact that let's use this as an opportunity for the health sector to also address detrimental issues, including, for example, forced labor that we have seen documented in production of health commodities like gloves, PPE, and many others. We have seen a number of cases in many countries where we still have industries that are employing child labor. We have a system of working with the industry to make sure that we identify those challenges and make the industries reform and comply with international labor standards as well. In terms of resource depletion, again, we are seeing a lot of investment in many industries, factories, and manufacturers of health commodities where they are now moving towards cleaner energy to make sure that they are reducing their own emission, but also making sure that they are putting devices that are supposed to reduce the consumption of a number of resources, including water and energy. The index is set in 3 levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. And those levels are essentially there to demonstrate the level of complexity. For us, when we apply the index, we would know at what level you are best at that particular point, and allowing us to work with you and bring on board a capacity building program that will help you transform to make sure that we are compliant. Level 1 simply means you are at a starting point. For example, you might be able to demonstrate that, yes, we are concerned about resource consumption, and therefore we are beginning to look at this and beginning to hire a consultant that can help us identify entry points. Whilst at level 3, this is a point where you can demonstrate that based on the knowledge and evidence that we have as a company, as a manufacturer, as a supplier, we have invested in solar panels that have allowed us to make sure that we are moving towards green solutions. We've seen quite a number of interesting examples in many countries where we are working, where companies, distribution centers are installing, for example, water harvesting facilities to reduce the consumption of water that is come through the municipalities. These interventions are not only seen as a cost, but seen as an investment, because ultimately what you see as a private sector is a reduction in terms of some of your expenditures. This could be on energy, this could be on water. In terms of the actual tool and the content, when you go into the tool, that is presented in a number of ways. You have a set of questions. So the tool, as I said, is organized in terms of greenhouse gas emission, resource, chemicals, and social dimension. And then we have those levels that I've already spoken to. But when you go into each of those modules, you will be presented with a set of questions that are there to ascertain the level of performance at which you are. And some of them have drop-down questions, some of them have got short answers, some of them will require you to provide evidence to support the responses that you are provided. And we are working on a mechanism to ensure that the information that is provided through the questionnaire is substantiated through a number of ways, working with our partners and working with our country offices that are in over 170 countries. So the index has a set of questions essentially that are there to also support your own capacity building efforts, to support your transformation, and to support your investment towards sustainable products. The index is brought to you in a number of ways, and this is mainly to make sure that it's easier to use, it's relevant, and it's something that is going to support your own transformation. We have provided a guidance note that essentially provide responses that we gathered during the pilot, working with a number of partners. We got feedback and we decided to make it into a frequently asked questions, but also providing additional guidance that can support you as you apply the index. The index also comes in form of an online tool. I will send the link once I finish my presentation, and then you can try it. But we also have Excel tools that also can be applied and used as you are using the index to ascertain your level of performance in adherence to sustainable dimension to make sure that we are decarbonizing the health sector through those 4 entry points that I did mention. We have seen quite a number of lessons. This is a product that I have been involved from the onset up to this stage. So I stand, I think, on firm ground to highlight some of these lessons that we have seen. Feedback so far that we are getting from a number of partners, including suppliers. As UNDP, this index has already been sent to all the suppliers of its health commodities. What we are getting and the feedback that we got so far is that we have provided an organized and a standardized tool that allows for a proper relationship between a supplier and a procurer of health commodities. In short, allowing governments that are procuring health commodities to understand the material content of the products that they are buying to make sure that these are not causing any harm to the life of the planet and the environment and the people. We've also seen that, as I did allude earlier on, that a tool has been used in many countries, especially in the developing South, to develop new policies and strategies that are supporting the decarbonization agenda of the health sector. We did support, for example, the SADC, Southern Africa Developing Community, to design their food procurement mechanism that we based on the index, and that is being applied on the 16 member states in that part of the world. Tanzania itself, Vietnam, and Argentina are some of the case studies that we do also have that have taken a step forward to make sure that they are enshrining the index into their national policies, systems, and strategies. We've also seen, if you look at the 4 themes that I presented in the index, those are domiciled in different line ministries. As such, the index has become a converging platform for health, environment, local government, social welfare, private sector, and many other partners, because the complexity of climate change, as demonstrated in that video, requires that we establish partnerships at different levels. And we are so happy and proud that in governments, in countries, at local level, people are seeing the need to work with different actors to address the issue of climate change and to identify those entry points that the health sector needs to adopt to make sure that they are moving towards sustainable approach. I do, for example, highlight how local government has been involved in many other to come up with solutions for waste management out of the health sector. In Ghana, for example, there's a private sector theme that has taken on board to make sure that they are collecting and participating medical waste from the health sector and taking forward for autoclaving and final disposal. As I said, we have also seen a very strong agenda coming out of academic institutions to make sure that we are coming up with new lessons that are supposed to be engineered and made available to students to make sure that the transformation agenda is only getting wider and adopted by many. The private sector, as I said, have also been critical in terms of giving us feedback, and this tool allows them to understand the evaluation criteria. At the moment, for us, I think the most important thing is to provide a mechanism that everyone who is participating in the health sector can understand some of the key parameters that are going to support the transformation of the health sector. And I think for us, putting this in front of the private sector so that as they go into their investment, as they go into their manufacturing of health commodities, they should already have this at the back of their mind to understand the effect and the impact of the products and commodities that they are putting out for the health sector. We, again, in terms of moving forward and the pipeline interventions out of the experience that, as I said, we have gathered over the last 10 years from the time we put across the Green Procurement Index, and now that we have been working on the Sustainable Procurement Index, we've seen a lot of recommendations and essentially asked from a number of partners. Part of what we are doing and developing now is move towards some of these standardized and formalized standards that are going to essentially be already demanded by many others. For your information, the index has already been taken on board by a number of global partners. If you go on the UNOPS website, if you're a supplier, you would already be required to make reference to the index. and many others. And as I said, as UNDP, we have already sent it to all the suppliers and manufacturers of health commodities. Our procurement spend value of $12 billion as partners is supporting that transformation. We are also, I think, working with a number of partners to consider working with supply chain schools to make sure that some of the key components that we are addressing in the index are taken on board. But I think key and many others is to make sure that we are developing a community of practitioners and case study library that is going to be available to a number of partners, including NHS. We are so proud of so many prototypes that already are coming out of NHS, including, for example, the solar ambulances that I think are being widely considered by many partners as possible interventions to adopt and scale up. We are also making sure that we are considering establishing an e-learning and knowledge products to make sure that the information that we are generating catalyze change not only in the countries where we are present, but beyond the borders, and bring this transformation of the health sector that we want to see in order for us to contribute towards reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, to reduce the amount and number of chemicals that are being used. I think we still see hospitals procuring, for example, mercury-containing devices. So with this information, we hope we can make that transformation. But key and also important is the idea of making sure that social dimensions, including anti-corruption, are addressed through procurement to make sure that the health sector is procuring commodities that are going to serve the needs of the people, and also making sure that at the same time we are not polluting the environment. Steve, this is where I end. I'll be on standby to take any questions and comments that will come from the audience. Thank you so much.
Ian, thank you very much indeed. That was a comprehensive review of what you've been doing in the UNDP. And you've prompted questions in the chat that I'm going to come back to. But before we do that, I'm going to introduce Lisa Dittmar, who led on the healthcare contribution to net zero strategy with Monitor Deloitte in the consulting world, and then chose to come out of consulting and into delivery in NHS England, and now holds this same responsibility in NHS England. So Lisa, you're extremely welcome. You have a very valuable background in this field, and look forward to hearing from you how the NHS is going to lead this process from a UK perspective.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me. Can I just, as a housekeeping piece, I can't share my screen until Ian, you take your slides down. So if you would take yours down, there we go. Perfect. Nice to meet you all. I see from the participants list that there's a few friendly and familiar faces in the audience today. So hello, and hello to those of you who I don't know. But my name is Lisa Dittmar, and I am the Net Zero and Sustainable Supply Chain Engagement Lead for NHS England. And what that means is I look after the engagement we have with our suppliers. And as part of the important journey to net zero that we're on as an NHS organization. What I want to do is essentially share with you a bit of a case study, really, on what we're doing in the NHS. And I think it follows on quite well from what Ian's presented. So let me just share my screen. Fantastic. Can you see that? Yes. Okay. Fantastic. So, in our program, it's actually a bit beyond net zero, and that's following very similarly to what Ian was saying too, is looking at net zero within the context of wider, not only environmental needs, but also across other social factors as well. So we derive our three strategic pillars in our program across net zero, social value, and modern slavery, and that really derives from the UK government's procurement policy in that regard. So we're very much aligned to what wider government are doing within the UK. But I'm going to focus today particularly on the net zero journey, and because, well, I want to focus on that so really what we're talking about from an NHS perspective when it comes to supply chain is 62% of overall emissions within the NHS are attributed to supply chain. We, Ian set it up very well. We're both part of the problem and part of the solution. And it's, we're not only on the front lines of climate change, but we're also contributing to it. And so we are absolutely committed to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And in fact, we are in 2020, we came out with a world-leading report on, and in it we set out that we will, for all of our direct emissions, get to net zero by 2032, and for all of our wider emissions, which include the supply chain, by 2045. Now that is 5 years ahead of the government target. So we are, we're actively working as hard and as fast as we can to address the climate emergency, because we recognize how big of an emergency it is for health. Like I said, 62% of the NHS carbon emissions are within the supply chain, and that really breaks down across a number of factors, and this was published in the report. But what I want to focus on talking to you today is about the two big ones down at the bottom here, which are the emissions within our suppliers themselves. So we, at the publication of this report, we wanted to ensure that we brought our suppliers on the journey with us, and that we were clear in what we were asking for, and so we committed to setting out a timeline for our suppliers to indicate the level of commitment and when. So a year after the publication of that report, we came up with something we call the Net Zero Supplier Roadmap. And that is a list of interim deliverables between now and the end of the decade, where we have committed to not doing business with suppliers that don't match or exceed our ambition to net zero. And so the first two supplier roadmap milestones are now in effect. So the first one was to include a bit of weighting in all of our procurements to focus on social value. And for us, social value includes net zero as well, and that's a key component of this. So we include within that minimum 10%, at least one question of that has to be focused on what the suppliers are doing through the delivery of their contract to contribute to reducing their emissions or to the net zero agenda. And then most recently, so it's a month old, but a month and a half old now, but now for all contracts over, or all new contracts over 5 million per annum, we are asking our suppliers to have a carbon reduction plan publicly available on their website. And this is a big step for us, because what it does is it targets that key spend, and it's asking our suppliers to really take that first step on the journey across the board. So if you're doing a lot of business with the NHS, you have to have a carbon reduction plan that includes the emissions that your organization has within the UK, and also what the plans that you have to reduce that. So for us, that's it's such an important milestone, because it's really shifting the industry, because the way of the NHS and the healthcare system works in the UK, the NHS has significant buying power, and more so than in a lot of other countries where healthcare might be more privatized, for example. So this policy rolled out at the NHS is really shifting the healthcare market, particularly in the UK, but there's impacts globally, because we know, of course, that the healthcare supply chain is very global in nature. The next two, I'll just go briefly through. Essentially, what we're looking to do in the future is go further, faster with our suppliers. So asking for more scopes of emissions, and bringing our supply chain into the mix as well. and then looking really specifically at products and saying, okay, well, how can we then inform our buying decisions directly around the products and services we're buying at scale. And but we're already getting started in certain areas of thinking about how we change demand within the system, which I'll share in a second. What we're also doing, so the supplier roadmap represents the bare minimum requirements for our suppliers. So really driving the change through procurement itself. One of the other things that we're doing is creating a sustainable supplier engagement program that has tools and enablement opportunities within that. And one of the key cornerstone things within that is something called the Evergreen Sustainable Supplier Assessment. And what that does is it's a short assessment that suppliers can take that gives them a sense of where they match up aligned to that roadmap, the current and future milestones within the roadmap, and gives an opportunity, a focus for one conversation within the NHS. We've done a number of pilots with quite a large cohort of suppliers, and we're very pleased to announce that will be coming in June. So we're really excited about that. What that will enable us to do is to really drive the conversation, particularly with those who are leading on sustainability, to say, okay, how can we collaborate together on this and really drive action together? And the Sustainable Supplier Assessment covers more than just net zero, although there is quite an emphasis on net zero because of the climate crisis and its impact on health. One of the other things we're doing is supporting circularity. And so this is an internal initiative, but essentially, how do we equip the people across the NHS to make changes to how they use and therefore need to buy things? And so we have a number of how-to guides and essentially toolkits for helping people think through that and develop programs around that and measure that, etc. One of the examples is for our walking aids. We're actually shifting how demand is captured. So Kent's is a trust that has implemented one of these programs, and they've actually paused new orders for crutches because they're getting so many in that they can reuse. So it's a real good news story for us, and it's something that, while it's a tangible example of how we're shifting to circularity within the NHS. Long way to go, of course, but something we're absolutely committed to. And I'll end there to leave some time for questions. Thank you very much.
Lisa, thank you very much, and thank you to both you and to Ian for setting off this subject.